Alright, Culture Hash here, Jack Kavanagh. Time to talk about a new album, Championships by Meek Mill. So, Meek Mill is a Philadelphia rapper. Meek Mill is signed to Rick Ross's Maybach music label, and Championships is his fourth studio album. Meek Mill has had a relatively successful rap career so far. Meek Mill is more of a street rapper, so he doesn't have any huge hit songs, but his albums always perform well in the charts. Meek Mill's 2015 album, Dreams Worth More Than Money, hit #1 in the US album charts, and last year's Wins and Losses hit #3 in the charts. So Meek Mill's albums always perform well. He's quite well known, but without a foundation of hit singles, Meek Mill's prominence has really been built through a series of high-profile incidents. The first was 2015's ill-fated beef with Drake. Meek Mill instigated this beef after accusing Drake of using ghostwriters on their recent track together, Rico. This created a huge controversy, and the two rappers went back and forth in a great hip-hop battle. The standout of this was Drake's back-to-back, which just eviscerated Meek Mill, and he lost a lot of credibility in the public eye at this time. In 2015, Drake was just relentless in just beating down Meek Mill. Meek Mill was going out with Nicki Minaj at the time, and Drake was just laying into Nicki Minaj just being bigger than Meek, and Meek was the opening act on Nicki Minaj's tour, and it was pretty hilarious. Meek definitely took a big L during this battle with Drake, and public opinion on him wasn't too good at this time. Last year, Meek Mill went to prison, and interestingly, this built up his profile a lot more and gave a lot more credibility back to Meek Mill. Meek Mill was sent to prison for quite a flimsy parole violation. I believe he was doing some wheelies on a motorbike, and this caused him to violate his probation, and he was sent back to prison. During this time in prison, Meek Mill got a lot of public support. The Philadelphia Eagles American football team adopted Meek Mill's Dreams and Nightmares, the opening track from his debut album, where Meek talks about his struggle and how he came up in the rap game. The Eagles players adopted this as their song, and in the run-up to the Eagles Super Bowl win last year, there was a lot of attention on Meek Mill and the fact that he couldn't watch the Eagles win the Super Bowl in the end because he was stuck in prison on a very flimsy charge. This granted a lot more prominence to Meek Mill, and there were a lot of high-profile celebrities saying that they should release him from prison. He doesn't deserve to be there. He was eventually released in April this year, and he immediately was flown in a helicopter to a Philadelphia 76ers basketball game. At the game, there was a lot of attention on Meek Mill, and all of the major press in the United States covered Meek Mill being free and able to walk around and live like a normal person again. Meek Mill got fucked over by the American legal system, and he became a sort of figurehead for a lot of these black men that are put in prison for pretty ridiculous charges. And this gave Meek Mill a lot more credibility and substance in terms of his personal persona, as people started to respect him more, and Meek Mill was making some interesting statements here. And since he's been out of prison, he's really been talking about just the crooked American legal system. Because Meek Mill's become the face of this miscarriage of justice in America, he's got a lot more cachet, and he had widespread support from the hip-hop community. Drake just ended the beef, and Drake actually appears on this Meek Mill album. It's good to see Drake and Meek Mill squashing their beef and moving forward again. Championships is Meek Mill's first full-length studio album since his recent release from prison. He's released a couple of projects in the meantime that have built up his persona a bit, and these projects were a bit more mature for Meek Mill, and he spoke more often about social justice and societal issues in America, particularly in Black America. And it feels like Meek Mill has matured, and his subject matter reflects this. It reminds me a bit of what's happened to T.I. recently. The bread and butter of both these rappers' prior careers was built on just street narratives and tough guy rhymes, but now they're talking a bit more about social justice, and there's a greater maturity in their work, which makes it a lot more interesting and a lot more personal. So it's good to see Meek Mill sort of grow up a bit and talk more about some of these issues that he's faced in his life. Therefore, Championships is the most mature Meek Mill album we've heard so far. It opens really nicely with the track Intro. Meek Mill always puts great intros on his albums, and this one is no different. This intro heavily samples Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight. This atmospheric beat is the perfect way to begin this new Meek Mill album. Building it around In the Air Tonight is just a great idea. I love when the drums just come in on the second half of the song and the tempo goes up and the intensity of Meek Mill's rhymes increases. Intro is a great way to start this album. Uptown Vibes follows shortly after this. This is a single that was released prior to the album. There's a strong Latin influence here, especially heard in the drums. It's got a feature from Fabulous and Anuel AA. Anuel AA is a buzzing Puerto Rican Latin trap rapper. He suits this track perfectly, and this is a bit more laid back Meek Mill here. It's just a track about like meeting girls and going out and having fun really. It works quite well. This album isn't super serious, even though it does deal with issues around social justice. So there are a few fun songs like this. Also, the track with Cardi B is just sort of like standard trap. On Me is one of the most generic trap beats I've heard. And it's just Meek Mill and Cardi B just going back and forth, just boasting. Meek Mill's just talking about girls. Cardi B's just boasting. It's nothing really too interesting or amazing at this point. And this album does have spotty moments like this. The album's about an hour, 10 minutes long. Slightly too long in my opinion. Tracks like On Me could have been cut out. I don't think the album should be super serious, but some of the more fun, laid-back tracks that particularly are present in the second half of the album sort of just bloat out the time a bit and don't really add enjoyment. These are just mainly just feel like filler tracks where Meek's just doing some stuff that are like on trend at the moment, so it's trap. And there's tracks like Almost Slipped where Meek Mill just sings the whole time. Feels a bit like he's stealing Little Baby's style here. It's just a track about how there was like a girl that Meek Mill was involved with and he felt like she was going to trick him and he just got out of that situation before it was too late. And it's just, he's not really saying anything interesting, it's not very good. So there's a lot of tracks like this on Championships, but the highlight of Championships are the tracks that deal with Meek Mill's personality, his upbringing in Philadelphia, and this can be heard on tracks like the title track, Championships. The beat on Championships is brilliant, I love it. This is Meek just talking about himself, what he's been through, how he's overcome it, and the beat just suits it so perfectly. There's this really mournful female vocal sample that punctuates the second half of the track. It really adds a mournful, like, somber tone to the track. And Meek's flow is just great here, he's got some brilliant lines. And on the outro, Meek just explains the album's concept where it just feels like he shouldn't be where he is, coming from where he's from, and it feels like he's just won the championship. Another track I enjoyed is What's Free. This one features Rick Ross and Jay-Z. Rick Ross, he's got a pretty decent flow here. He's recently got in trouble as well for calling Tekashi 6ix9ine a faggot. You don't really hear the word faggot as much in hip-hop these days, which I think is good. And I think it's quite positive to see a negative reaction to Rick Ross just throwing around homophobic slurs in his verses. I don't really like Rick Ross on this. He's got a decent flow, but at the end of the day, he's not saying anything. I can't believe he still talks about being a drug kingpin. It's so played out at this point, and his verse doesn't really tie into Meek Mill or Jay-Z. Both Meek Mill and Jay-Z have got really standout verses here, just talking about just like being black in America. And Rick Ross is just talking about selling drugs, and it's a bit like on Accident Murderer from Nas's Life is Good. The subject of that song was people who accidentally kill people and sort of boast about it, which is an interesting concept for the song, but then Rick Ross's verse was just him just boasting, and it just is pointless. And that's what he does here on What's Free. All Rick Ross can talk about is being a drug kingpin because he's so one-dimensional, and on this he shows that again. He doesn't ruin the song, but he doesn't make it better either. Meek's got a really good verse here, but the standout is Jay-Z, who's got really freewheeling, just like almost 2 minutes long at the end, just going through just all these issues. He throws a little shot at Kanye West as well. But I love this new introspective Jay-Z. We heard this on 444, and Jay-Z's just continuing this sort of maturity again that he's been displaying in his raps for the last couple of years now. He's still one of the best rappers out, and this is just a great verse from a veteran rapper. A real pleasure to hear Jay-Z on this album, and a big cosign for Meek Mill in his career so far. I quite like the track Splash Warning. This one features Future. There's got quite a nice little rhyme scheme going on. It sounds a bit annoying, but it's just every verse they end go, okay, okay, I'm gonna do a verse. Okay. It works quite well. I think some people might find it a bit annoying, but I think it works nicely. Young Thug and Future have a nice little collaboration here. They work, and Young Thug finishes Future's verse for him. Works quite nicely. It's just a bit of a mindless trap banger, but it's very enjoyable, and I think the guests work quite nicely here. My favourite track on this album is Oodles and Noodles Babies. Again, this is introspective Meek Mill, going through his upbringing. Great sample again on here, great beat, really soulful, gives it a real retro feeling, and this ties perfectly with Meek Mill discussing his early life. For the most part on this album, the tracks with the most nostalgic feel are just the best introspective tracks, such as Stay Woke, which uses the same sample as Jay-Z Dead Presidents, which gives it a real nostalgic feel where, again, Meek's talking about his early life and his issues that he's faced throughout himself. And there's great imagery on Stay Woke as Meek talks about these early issues in his life, and using the same sample as Dead Presidents gives this a real retro, introspective feel, and that is also why I love Oodles and Noodles Babies. This track was released prior to the album, and Meek's just got so many great verses on here, great lines, and again you just get this real sense of understanding of who he is, where he's came from, and the adversity that he's faced throughout his life. And that's what makes Championships a really enjoyable album. This is the most personal Meek Mill album we've heard. On here Meek shows a lot of maturity, and the level of his rhymes have certainly increased. This is the best Meek Mill album out so far. I feel like in the past he struggled to really carry an album on his own. They've usually been overloaded with guest features, but on this one, the guests support Meek quite well, and his story is so compelling that it just makes it really fresh, and there are some great beats on here, some of the best beats on the album I've heard this year. The issue is, the album's a bit overlong, and Championships does have some moments that feels like filler. I really enjoyed this one. Meek Mill Championships, 7 out of 10.